Good evening. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the West Hartford Public Schools for Wednesday, November 3rd at 7 p.m. I will ask to please call the roll.
Ms. Aronson,
Present.
Dr. Chang,
Here.
Ms. Poland,
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson,
Here.
Ms. Wilcox,
Here.
Dr. Steinberg, Mr. Zdanowicz,
Here.
Student Representative Avery Woods Weber,
Here.
Student Representative Andrew Maglio.
Present.
Thank you. And for the record and for the public's notice, Dr. Steinberg expects to be back with us at our next meeting. Andrew, can you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order, so we'll move on to public communications. These are comments from the public, which the board members do not respond to. Comments are limited to 3 minutes apiece and 7 people per topic. I will call you up. When I call your name, you can come up to the podium here, start by indicating your name and your address, and then you'll have 3 minutes. And keep your eye over here, and Charlotte will show you a yellow card when you have a minute left, and a red card when your time has expired. So first we have David McCulloch. Over to the podium. Thank you. And that microphone will pick you up the minute you start speaking.
David McCulloch with at 347 North Steele in West Hartford. Good evening. My name is David McCulloch. I'm the father of 3 children, a 1st and 4th grader at Aiken, and a 4-year-old who will attend Aiken soon. It's come to my attention recently that the Board of Education is contemplating the development of various identity, diversity, justice action planning, social justice standards, and equity instruction at the elementary school level. I want to voice my support for the instruction at the elementary school level of being kind, thoughtful, and most importantly, viewing everyone as equal regardless of any internal or external trait. That's extremely important. However, I want to voice my strong and unwavering opposition to teaching children that they are different, unique, special from one another based on race, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity, or that these concepts matter whatsoever. The very real truth is that the vast majority of children have no idea of these concepts and do not have the ability to understand the complexity of these topics in a modern lens. It's also overly burdensome to place yet such another yet complex topic on already overburdened teachers. That the board is even seriously contemplating a curriculum that teachers, rather than parents, would introduce topics such as the ability to identify as a different gender than the one assigned at birth, or that one's race results in differences with peers to kindergartners or other elementary school children is profoundly troubling. I moved to this town completely voluntarily from Washington, D.C. I did not have a job here, and my job is still based in Washington. I chose to move to West Hartford rather than any other nearby town or much more rural towns in order that my children would understand that they're the same as everyone regardless of color, gender expression, or sexual orientation, simply by playing, having fun, and just being children with a variety of diverse friends. Children do not need to be told that they are different or that their schoolmates are different or that their gender matters or that their race matters by someone who just met them a couple months ago and does not understand their internal struggles or how they will react to such ideas. These are concepts for parents to instruct them on, the very same parents that have voluntarily chosen to live in a very diverse town and send their children to school to what, for the most part, are diverse public schools. No one lives in West Hartford because they don't accept diversity or inclusion. If they felt that way, they would move to a different town that is far less diverse. Frankly, less diverse towns abound in this area. Instead, the only logical conclusions that I can draw as to why the board is attempting to incorporate such a curriculum is because of, 1, some misguided virtue signaling to people in town, the broader area, regionally, or nationally, or how progressive they are. Or 2, a desire to instruct our very young children on how they should react to their very personal feelings. That will inevitably change day by day, year by year, as they interact with the wonderfully diverse and educated town in which we live. Unless such instruction is for either one of these two reasons. I think the board can accomplish its goals by simply instructing children to be nice to one another, something that I think the board has readily achieved based on my experience as a fifth-year Aiken parent, where I've seen virtually nothing but kindness from my children's classmates. In short, I see no reason to adopt any part of this curriculum and many reasons not to. I encourage the board to stop spending its valuable time and energy on such personal, moral, and political endeavors and focus on improving literacy, STEM skills, and civics understanding in our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny Fisher?
Good evening. My name is Jenny Fisher, and I have 3 kids in the West Hartford school system. I have a 1st and 3rd grader at Wolcott and a 6th grader at Sedgwick. I am here to share my thoughts and experiences about including lessons about gender identity in the curriculum. Last spring, I picked up my 3 children from school, and like every day when they got into the car, I asked how their day was. After receiving some feedback and the typical fines, my 5th grader shared that he learned about pronouns in school. Super, I said. Tell me about pronouns. Thinking this was a grammar lesson. He said, well, we all had to go around the room in the classroom and say what pronoun we identified as in front of everyone. So immediately, my kindergartner and 2nd grader asked him what that meant, in which he responded with, well, you are a boy if you have short hair and play sports, and girls usually have long hair and like to play with dolls. At this point, my 2nd grader says, well, that doesn't make sense because girls can have short hair and play sports too, and boys can have long hair and play with dolls. So of course, my children direct the question to me, but I was completely unprepared. Here I am coming at the conversation from behind and struggling to explain to my 3 children at 3 very different ages in a way they would understand. I am quite confident that the stereotypes my son walked away with after this lesson would be the polar opposite of what West Hartford Public Schools would want to communicate to the students. However, these are the unintended consequences of asking our ill-prepared teachers to deliver instruction on topics that they are not qualified to talk about. I want to be clear that I was not upset with his teacher in any way. Being a teacher for 17 years, 5 as an instructional coach and working with teachers on delivering instruction and interpreting lesson plans, handing a lesson plan to a teacher with minimal professional development and expecting someone else's lesson plan and intention to be followed across the district is very short-sighted. These conversations are appropriate to happen in the home at the right time for each family. My family eats dinner most nights together, and we discuss treating others with respect, dignity, and accepting others no matter what someone may do, say, or look like. We love our Wolcott School and how diverse this amazing community is, and is the sole reason for staying in our home and not moving out of Wolcott District. I am 100% in favor in teaching our children to treat others with respect, no matter our differences. I had the opportunity to view the lesson plan, and when words such as cisgender, non-binary, gender questioning, among others, are being defined on the board, and we are making students question ideas about themselves that many had not thought of before, that might be a problem. Our family believes that there are a number of topics that should be taught by a family, gender identity being one of them. Why I am here speaking about this tonight, beyond my disagreement on the content of the lesson, the most disappointing thing was we were not made aware of this lesson being taught. Therefore, we were not prepared to discuss this with our children. We have elected this board to guide the education in this town. Being parents like us in town, were you aware that lessons such as these are being delivered to children across the district in this manner?
I need to ask you to wrap up, please.
And if you were not aware, would you approve it now, knowing how it's being interpreted by our children? Thank you.
Thank you. Before you head back, thanks, Mark. Can you add your address? Can you just state your address for the record?
8 Meadow Farms Road.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I can't read the next first name, but the last name's Coyle? Vicki, thank you. That's all right.
Hello, I'm Vicki Coyle. I live at 442 Mountain Road. I also have 3 children, 2 students at Bugby and a baby who will one day go to Bugby. I'm also here today to speak about the gender identity curriculum that I understand is being considered by the board and the district. I want to be clear up front that to the extent I'm expressing a viewpoint, it is not about any curriculum that teaches that each student should be shown kindness and respect, including as it relates to a student with a different gender identity. My remarks are about a curriculum that goes beyond the treatment of other students and instead is giving instruction to students about what gender identity is. There is no data available on the effects of teaching young children this information. There are no best practices to go on, no studies, and no knowledge longer term about whether this curriculum is beneficial or harmful. It truly feels like a real-time social experiment being conducted on my kids. Furthermore, the curriculum will be taught by teachers who do not have expertise in this area and are not prepared to react to questions and confusion that it causes. These are sensitive topics. Many families believe that this is a matter for the family. Families want to decide what information is presented and when. Not all children are developmentally ready for nuanced topics like this at young ages. Because of the sensitivity of this issue, there must be an opt-out right for parents if this curriculum is advanced. To date, I am told that parents have been denied a right to opt out from these lessons. Learning loss is another reason why this is not the right time to implement this new curriculum. My child is still experiencing learning loss from missing 1/3 of her kindergarten year. She has never had a normal school year. West Hartford Public Schools should be focusing on getting students past a difficult period, not developing a new curriculum about sensitive topics. On the topic of transparency, this is a major concern. I have spoken to at least 20 families in the past week. Not a single person was aware that this curriculum was being under consideration, and not a single person supported it. This is families along the political spectrum that think gender identity for elementary-age children is inappropriate and confusing. What is needed as this process continues is to be wide open to community engagement. The committee working on it should be of all viewpoints on this topic. To the extent that experts are being engaged on this topic, it should include experts that have a different viewpoint, including an expert that maybe thinks this isn't appropriate for elementary-age children. Even if the board ultimately were to disagree with that expert, all arguments and viewpoints should be considered. Finally, there should be widespread and upfront communication with the community that this curriculum is under consideration. Explicit communication out to the whole West Hartford Public School community that this is under consideration, I think would be appropriate at this time. If the district believes that gender identity curriculum is important for elementary-age children and necessary, there should be no problem notifying all constituents and getting as many viewpoints on this topic as available. Thank you for hearing my speech.
Next, Alexandra Banashik.
My name is Alexandra Banashik, and I live on 329 Cumberland Road. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I would like to make few comments regarding mask mandate in schools, as well as the experience of standing here in front of you. It does not come easy for me to speak publicly. I do that because it hurts me seeing my children and children of my neighbors muffled every morning when they enter school. Me and several other members of our community come here every 2 weeks and bring you proofs that not only masks are not clinically beneficial, but they could be causing a lot of harm to our children in the long term. Masks prevent children from learning phonics, reading, expressing emotions, understanding instructions, making new friends, and so on. We ask you for your comments. We ask you for timelines on these health-related policies. What responses do we receive from you? None. I understand that you have no obligation in responding to public commentary. However, we live in a society where we have no obligation to express our appreciation or apology, but we still do. Now I have to thank Mr. Moore, who always responds to my emails in a timely manner. Unfortunately, his responses give me an impression that he and the Board of Education has no power in making the right decisions for our schools and for our children. Masks needs to be worn even if there is no data supporting it. So-called COVID vaccines. And as you know, we could not call these injections a vaccine if the definition of a vaccine has not been changed at the beginning of 2021. So the so-called COVID vaccines need to be promoted without much evidence in short-term benefits for children. and absolutely no knowledge on long-term effects. All that for the COVID-19 relief money. Without compliance to the state regulations, West Hartford Public Schools would have not received over $14 million in COVID relief funds. The amount sounds great, but for what price? Not worth it. Now, there's no emergency in West Hartford. West Hartford, mayor announced. That means we can go to restaurants, stores, sports events without wearing a mask, except schools and libraries. Now, how a parent should explain to their young children why they still need to wear a mask in school and in library. I have elementary school children. They are too small for learning political science. Dear Board of Education members, please support what is right. Please help us to unmask our children in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other members of the public who wished to speak? I think somebody might have come in after I took the sign-up sheet away. Come forward, please. Yes.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak today, and thank you also all of you for your service to the city. My name is Gail Daires. I live on 56 Gillette Street. I would have liked to raise several important issues tonight related to our children, but due to these 3-minute restrictions, I am afraid that I may be only raising this face mask issue today. In the past meetings, including today, I have been hearing concerned parents raising questions and demanding answers on the efficacy of this face mask on children. But I have not heard any response given to the parents by this board. Parents have presented studies from other states and rightly questioning its benefits. I have a few study results to add today to the previous parents' presentation. Recently, the Surgeon General of Florida, Dr. Joseph A. Ladapo, medical doctor, PhD, stated that, I quote, "The data do not support any clinical benefits for children in school with mask mandates." Also, I quote, "Putting a mask, something on the face of your child, is not a parent's decision, is not a school board decision. It's not the school's decision. It is not the governor's decision. It is no one else's decision except for the parents." So research shows that mask increases incidence on dental cavities, according to Dr. Ron Raimondi, and dermatitis, according to Public Health Ontario, and impetigo, bacterial infection that produces red sores and can lead to kidney damage, according to Mayo Clinic. They also increase the risk of bacterial pneumonia because they cause the wearer to breathe in his own bacteria instead of allowing him to breathe in fresh air. The incidence of bacterial pneumonia is on the rise as a result of moisture collecting in the face mask. So another medical doctor, Senator Ron Paul, said, and I quote, "Some places with strict mask mandates have experienced a spike in COVID-19 infections." This is what he said. Also, there is no science behind masks. There is no value to the close masking at all. It is like wearing your underwear. You might as well cut your underwear up and wear your underwear as protection, which I have been using, literally. A scientist named Dennis Rancourt, PhD, said that by making mask wearing recommendation and policies for the general public, governments have both ignored the scientific evidence and done the opposite of following the precautionary principle. So it is my sincere hope that this board would do its due diligence and restore the freedom of breathing fresh air to our kids by removing these mask mandates from the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the board this evening? Anyone? Going twice? All right. Thank you very much for your comments. We'll now move on to unfinished business. We don't have any unfinished business. We'll move on to new business, and item A, ratification of the West Hartford Education Association contract. And I see that we have Dr. Morrow and Mr. Ledwith here to present.
We don't have a presentation, Charlie. But Paul probably...
Very nice of you to put that down for Paul, but...
Paul probably has about a 20-page deck he's going to go through in a few minutes. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss the results of the West Hartford Education Association and the Board of Education contract negotiations. We wanted to first commend the work of both negotiation teams who worked together very hard over the course of several evenings on this contract. For the Board of Education, we had our elected officials, our chairperson, Deb Poland, Amanda Aronson, and Liz Wilcox as part of our committee. Thank you. Andy and myself were part of the team. Liz Hewitt was there as well. Tom Moore joined us at the opening session of the negotiations, and Paul Vicinius was with us for a couple of sessions as well. The WHEA was led by President Teresa McEwen, Chris Bombara, Elise Dunphy, Christine Kavanaugh, Brian Peconin, David Simon, and Ron Wazanko. We had several collaborative meetings with the association through September and the first part of October. Each session we exchanged proposals, and each session included a discussion around the issues we were trying to resolve as a group. It also provided us with an opportunity with each session to put the negotiations aside for a little bit and have dinner as a team, which I think both sides would agree helped us with working towards a common goal. Despite both sides' efforts, these talks did not result in an agreement, so we decided to go to mediation, which took place on the evening of October 14th. And for those of us who may not have been involved in mediation before, this is a process where we bring in a mediator from outside the organization who works with both parties. We're both in separate rooms, and the mediator works between the two rooms and attempts to find common ground on open items. There was several back and forths throughout the evening of the 14th, and we did eventually reach a settlement sometime after midnight, so October 15th, I think, officially. Before we talk through the details of the agreement, I think we'd all agree that negotiating a contract during a pandemic is challenging. There's no debating that our teachers have not worked harder in their careers than they have over the last 18 months. While many parts of corporate Connecticut were working from home, our teachers, administrators, support staff were in school every day navigating the hybrid model. Kids are at home, kids are in school, kids are quarantining, teachers are going home every night not knowing who would be in school the next day from a quarantine standpoint. But they never stopped working to reach every student, no matter what platform they had to do to reach those students, whether it was in the classroom or via the computer. And on top of all that, always putting the health and safety of our students first and foremost during this pandemic, in addition to supporting their everyday learning. So while all this was happening, we're statutorily required to negotiate a contract. Which we hope honors the work of all of our teachers during this incredibly difficult time while balancing the financial needs of our community. Which means, as in negotiations, as we all know, sometimes you have to say no, and that's not easy to do during a difficult time like this. That being said, this 3-year contract we do feel is a very fair contract for our teachers and our community, and we feel demonstrates the Board of Education's pride and respect that we have for what our teachers do day in and day out to support all 9,300 of our students and families, particularly during the pandemic and hopefully soon after the pandemic. So we'll talk now through the details of the agreement. We'll start with the wages. And thanks to Liz Hewitts and the WHEA's creativity, we did modify our current wage schedule. That does fix some of the long-term problems that we've had with our wage schedule. So we did remove the first step of the wage schedule, which will provide us an opportunity to recruit teachers in a more effective manner. As at least the committee knows, our first step bachelor's level teacher salary is 29th out of 32 in Hartford County. Our master's level first year teachers step is number 20 out of 32 in Hartford County. So by removing that first step, that'll move us up into a slightly more competitive range compared to districts surrounding West Hartford. We also added a step between the penultimate step and the final step, eliminating a large salary bubble that had grown over the last couple of contracts. So there was about a $12,000, $13,000 increase going from the penultimate step to the top step. So by adding a step in between those two steps, we eliminate that bubble, and we took some of those funds and we smoothed that out over the lower steps. So in the end, teachers on step will move up a step in each of the next 3 years, and then teachers on the top step will get a 2% general wage increase in each of the next 3 years. In terms of healthcare changes, you may recall that we did move to the Connecticut State Partnership Plan 3 years ago, resulting in 7-figure savings for the Board of Education. So the only healthcare change with this contract is a modest 0.75% increase in the premium cost share over the 3 years. We've also increased the tuition reimbursement from $80,000, the tuition reimbursement account from $80,000 to $110,000 over the course of the next 3 years, and we will increase the maximum from $1,000 per employee to $1,500 per employee over the course of those 3 years. We'll also adjust our pay cycle so that teachers can now get paid over the entire year versus paid from, right now they can only get paid September through June. Under this new change, teachers will now have the option of getting paid all year long, which is a great change for our teaching staff. We've also included a requirement that high school teachers attend our graduations every June, which our teachers wholeheartedly agreed to. Was in the best interest of our students. And lastly, we will form a committee comprised of teachers and administrators to look at our elementary school schedules and come up with an equitable and consistent special schedule, providing classroom teachers more opportunities to plan as a team throughout the day. This committee, which will be led by Paul Vicinis and Teresa McEwen, will provide recommendations to be put in place for the next school year, and those recommendations will need to be in place by April 1st of this school year. So we'll pause there and turn it over to the Board of Education for any comments that they had or any questions that they would have for the committee.
Thank you for your presentation, and we'll start with Mark.
Nothing. I gotta remember that after. No, thanks. I know how hard of work it is and long days to do this, so appreciate the team that was put together to represent the board. There's some long days in there. 2% I see over, the 3 years, but what's the overall percentage and how is the overall percentage attached to the salaries versus the other, if you have that data, the other increase?
Yeah, so the total increase over 3 years was 11.5%. So 2% to folks on the top step, and then this, as you remember, Mark, from past negotiations, our step costs are a primary driver of our current wage schedule. So the rest of those dollars are built into those steps. Yeah, so 11.5 over 3 years.
Other questions? No other questions? Amanda? Look like you.
Great. I was going to say thank you for covering all of the points that you did, because they would have been the ones that we would have covered as part of the team. But one additional point was that I think we can all express that one of the things we also looked to do in these negotiations was to retain the conditions in which our teachers work, so that we have support staff and we have all of the things that allow the environment that our teachers are teaching within to be as supported as possible, so that as we look down the road, those things don't become at risk. So I think at the end of the day, we feel very good about what we were able to do, and we also tried to look long-term at the conditions with which, in which people are working. So I know we all express our gratitude to the teachers, and we thank them for their negotiation as well, because we certainly had quite a year, and we thank them for it.
Thank you.
Mark, follow-up
Sorry,
question?
follow up, as Amanda's talking, and I just kind of thought of, so the 11.5% over the 3 years, and there it goes. And there it goes. All right.
We agree.
Yes. Well, see, oh, sorry, there it goes. God, I guess I'm getting old. Yeah, long night last night, that's what it was.
Yeah.
What's the dollar amount? Is there a dollar amount assigned to the 11.5%? That's,
There is, and Liz was
Or a
supposed to
yearly-
join us.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine, we could, if you don't
Yeah,
have.
we can get that to
Yeah.
you, Mark.
Yeah,
It
we'll
really,
get that to you,
it
Mark.
depends
No
upon,
worries.
again, on the step cost. It depends, a lot of it isn't set because, again, it's going to depend on retirees, new hires,
right,
where
right.
people are hired, where they move up in the steps, and when, and where they are when different levels are canceled and condensed.
And we also compare, teachers do, is where we fall into our, even Durg B or even surrounding areas, and how competitive we become with this step. So, where negotiations fell out through the state, where did we fall out in West Hartford?
So this is it's a very, as I said earlier, very competitive and very fair contract for our teachers. We do feel that the changes that we made to the salary scale will help move us up, in Hartford County. As I said, we're 29 out of 32 at the bachelor's level first step and 20 out of 32 at the master's level. So this will allow us to move at least up a few spots from where we are right now.
Yeah, I guess, I think I'm thinking of something else, is where, a school, say New Britain or Avon or Farmington had
Okay.
2.5%,
All right.
3%.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Mark. As far as where in the scale, it's tough to know where it will all end, because obviously there's still a number of contracts that are in mediation, negotiation, and so forth. When we were mediating this is on the upper end, probably the top 15% of the deals that are coming through. And again, we felt that it was a fair approach. We're hampered in some aspects, as you remember from doing this before, by the step scales, and then trying to then smooth out and then also reward teachers who are at the maximum level as well. So we felt that this was, but it's probably going to end up, it will end up when all of the results are in through mediation and even some arbitrations, probably being in the top 20% for the state, if I had to, or for the Hartford County, I should say,
Yeah.
not the state.
I think it's fair to say the ones that were negotiated this summer came in at a lower number. And as momentum came in, ESSER money came in, funding came in, you're beginning to see those numbers increase. And the ones that are going to arbitration, there's some very high numbers out there that are still in mediation right now. So I think you're seeing them do this kind of over time.
Jason?
Yes, thank you for spelling that out. One of the things that came up as you're talking about that, and then the budgetary context for the district, were negotiations and the position of the district in this contract, was it, were the ESSER funds and the other federal monies that we had, did that shape how we were able to provide a particular package, or is this something that will change after that term?
So, and Andy knows much better than I in terms of the use of ESSER funds and in terms of what you can use and not use to offset salaries, so we did not include that as part of our process here.
Yeah, this is a step up, this is an aside, this is just our regular approach. You know, we're not allowed to supplant staffing or, I'm sorry, salary in this kind of approach for that.
It's an interesting piece of the negotiation this year that's in the cycle, because you can't ignore that there's ESSER funds out there and that there's increased funding coming to education. While at the same time, that can't be used for raises. But what can and can't be used versus the atmosphere of negotiations as people are going to arbitration is really part of that whole cycle. Just as is at a time when teachers, you know, I don't think it's not unfair for me to say that across the state and across the country we see teacher morale, teacher retirement. We've discussed it here. For the first time in my career, especially as administrator, we see legitimate teacher shortages. And so all of those pieces affect that climate when you go in. So I guess the direct answer is no, Jason, it doesn't affect things in terms of our ability to pay. But yes, it absolutely affects things in terms of the overall picture of the environment.
Other questions? One final question. The teachers all ratified this last week. Is that what the time frame was?
Yep, last Wednesday.
And do we have any idea what the results of that vote were, or just
We
that
don't
it
have the
passed?
exact numbers. We
were told it was enthusiastically in favor.
Yeah.
I believe
Okay.
was the phrase I was given.
Excellent. Thank you. And I want to thank my teammates on this board table and the administration and those teachers who came and participated in this process as well. It was certainly educational for me, and gave us an opportunity to have some really open conversations about how much we value the work that they do for the children and families in our district. So with that, I will ask for a motion that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between the West Hartford Education Association and the Board of Education for the period of July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Amanda Aronson.
Thank you, Amanda. And a second?
Second.
Seconded by Liz Wilcox. Are there any further questions or comments for discussion? If not, I will try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it, and the contract is ratified. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I know.
We'll move on to staff communications and reports, and start with the superintendent's report.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks, everyone. I'm going to save the good news for the student report. I won't, but we do have another state title in town, so that's very good news, along with individual state titles. So very, very strong seasons going on right now as our kids get back to the athletics fields, which is great to see. We're very happy that the FDA has given emergency authorization to the Pfizer COVID vaccine for use in children age 5 through 11. As we move through time, I feel like it's been 2 years, because it almost has been 2 years, where we just keep talking about mitigation strategies and layers, and that we can't do everything necessarily, but all of these things that we're doing hopefully create these different layers. And this is the vaccine we saw when teachers became vaccinated, when our support staff became vaccinated. We saw what happened to our cases immediately. And our student vaccines, I've talked about every time I've been here, but our secondary school vaccination rate is second to none, and our interruption of education through quarantines and otherwise has been West Hartford's been one of the least impacted districts in the state. It has been a major discussion. There was a Sunday meeting about it where I was asked, Tom, do you want to come talk about the impact of quarantines? And I'm like, I'm probably not the best person to talk about it this year because the impact is not dramatic here in West Hartford. And the state is looking at some different strategies now that we are coming into a different time period with this as far as quarantines go. And that information will be coming out within the next week, I believe. And as per usual, we'll follow state guidance with that. But what the vaccine, the emergency use authorization means is another strategy for parents and their children to feel at ease as their children come to school. Appointments, as we know, are available at pediatricians' offices, pharmacies, and other sites in the area. We urge parents to talk to your pediatrician. But in addition to that, working with our local health department, we've partnered with Yukon Outpatient Pavilion to provide vaccinations on Friday, November 12th and Friday, November 19th, and then there'll be ones a month later, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That those time blocks are reserved for West Hartford students. Andy Morrow sent out communication with that phone number so parents could make appointments. And so that's one avenue that parents definitely have that we're happy to provide, and we're thankful for the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District to helping and set those up, and to Yukon for partnering with us. In addition, Andy's been working hard, and so much of this credit goes to Dr. Morrow, as does so much of our response to the pandemic. We're partnering with the State Department of Public Health, and we'll have one of the first in the state, if not the first, vaccination clinics for children 5 to 11 that is school-based, and we will have them at Charter Oak and Whiting Lane on November 10th for the first dose, and December 1st for the second dose. Information was sent to families today in that age-wide email to families. Parents can come, but again, parents need to come with their child, parent or guardian. And it's after school. It's available during after-school hours for people to come in if they can't make an appointment or can't get something somewhere else. And this is another opportunity for us to make our schools even safer for our kids. And again, thanks to Andy for this, and hopefully if people have questions, feel free, again, call your pediatrician, but you can contact our school nurse or questions about those clinics, but that information's gone out today. We continue to see a very limited number of cases, 4 in the past week. This is, we're in a good place right now, and I noticed, Deb, you knocked on wood earlier. I find myself doing that a lot, but we're very, very pleased with the lack of interruption to our school year. And I will say this. I've spoken throughout the year about a lot of the struggles that have happened, and kindergarten, especially first grade, especially, we'll talk about our increased numbers there and kids coming back. And then we talk about 6th grade. We talk about some 7th grade adjustments for 7th graders that maybe hadn't been in schools up to this point. And then high school. And it's hard to tell people at the beginning of a school year. You got to be patient because we also have to teach behavior and discipline. People think of school discipline as something you do to kids, and it's something you do with kids. And how we behave in school is muscle memory. It's a different kind of muscle memory, but it is learned behavior. And we need some time to establish classroom routines, to establish this is how we behave in school. And I think you're seeing it kind of top down, high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. There's an element of calming, and over the past 2 weeks, I think you're definitely seeing a more regular school environment than maybe we saw in September or the beginning of October. I think things are getting to a sense of normalcy, thankfully. That doesn't mean we don't have struggles. We absolutely do, but this is something that I think it's important to mention since I've talked about it throughout the year. Now, on the exceptional news side, and this is just this is freakishly exceptional news. Huge congratulations to students who received perfect scores in their AP exams. Now, we all know the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 score, 5 being the highest you can get, but within that subset 5, their continued subscores, and there are people that get a perfect score on that exam. And I want to congratulate 4 West Hartford students that did, and I want to talk about how rare that is. Nora Holmes, Hall's AP research paper, she was from Hall. Only less than 1.5% of all people worldwide that write that paper end up getting a perfect score in AP research. Nora did, congratulations. At Conard, Anastasia Andrews and Akshat Juneja, 2 of 33 perfect scores worldwide. Worldwide, 33 perfect scores. 2 of them in the same class at Conard. It's remarkable. That's out of just under 47,000 students worldwide who took the exam. And Maya Palanki, AP Spanish Language and Culture, one of 77 worldwide. And the AP Spanish Language and Culture, let me tell you, that test is no joke. As far as the AP tests go, that's recognized as one of the most difficult ones, Spanish Language and Culture. One of 77 perfect scores worldwide out of over 148,000 exams taken. So really, congratulations to those kids, but congratulations to the teachers. Congratulations to the teachers K through 12 that have been a part of this, to the families, to those kids that certainly worked so hard to get that. And just, this is one of those things that, are we preparing kids? There's evidence, at least some kids are getting very good preparation. I can promise you that. So congratulations to them. Really good. And I want to mention on Monday, just to show our connections, we've talked a lot about Project Blue Devil Direct, our partnership that we created with Central Connecticut University with Future Educators Diversity a few years ago. And that's gotten attention. You know, Rosina, Jamal, Kim, they've presented that program at national conferences for other schools to try to emulate. And Jason Irizarry, who is the dean of the NEAG School of Education at UConn, was a visitor to us on Monday and visited with our Future Educators Diversity. And, I had the opportunity to meet with him, as did our 2 principals, because it was the kids from both schools, and Rosina, and it was just him talking about his own experience, what it means to be the Dean of Education at NEAG, what these kids are looking for, and just how impressed he was with our kids over an hour-long question and answer session about what does it look like for a future of education, what made you get into this field of education. I can't thank Dean Irizarry enough for that visit, and our partnership with UConn continues to grow, and we had preliminary discussions on a lot of exciting partnership opportunities for West Hartford Public Schools and the NEAG School of Education. And I can tell you this, and this hurts me as a UMass alum. The NEAG School of Education right now is second to none in terms of the teachers they are putting out. It is a top-notch school of education. Somebody comes from NEAG, you look at it and you're like, okay, you've been trained to teach. You know what you are. And if we can find teachers from NEAG, we hire them because they are great. So any partnerships we can get with NEAG School, we are all over. And then lastly, I hate to share this news, but Conard specifically, but all of West Hartford, lost a good friend this weekend and a member of our Conard family. And Carole Massaro, PE teacher, soccer coach, wonderful person to work with, to have known much of my career in West Hartford Public Schools. You know, there's people that talk about the Conard spirit, what makes it special. Carrie's one of those people that got it. Fierce devotion to her kids, tenacity, and belief in building a culture so that all of Conard saw itself as a team. She's a staff leader in that. She was a leader with our kids, and for her family, our condolences, everybody on our leadership team and everybody from West Hartford. She's one of those people that if you didn't get to know her, you missed out. But we will miss Carrie deeply, and our thoughts and prayers are with her family.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Tom? I just had a question. Can you talk a little bit about how Election Day went yesterday with the schools? 8 of our schools are used as polling locations, so it's just kind of good for us to have a sense of how that all went. And if we could just have a very brief, very high-level overview of the professional development that the teachers had yesterday,
Sure.
that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Professional development yesterday was on the building and department level instead of a district-wide professional development where everybody comes together. And one of the things you know is that to do professional development with parking on election day is just really difficult. Any of you that have been to Convocation when we had it, you see the parking at Conard, and that keeps voters away, unfortunately. And so we tried to make it at home, both on building-based needs, depending on the level, and department level needs. So, for example, the physical education department was doing team building adventure exercises, and they were actually over at Winding Trails doing professional development in those areas. We had music opportunities with Farmington Public Schools, with our 2 districts getting together. So there's both individual and then there's department that's looking out. One of the things that we've talked about that we've wanted to do is in our school counseling department is sending our school counselors out to universities to meet. And so they did that yesterday, and they all went to different places to meet with university officials, admissions officials in areas throughout New England, come back, share that information, what they gleaned from that. So a wide variety of topics. Andy, I think yesterday might be the first time on election day we didn't get calls about something interfering. We were worried because there's some sports events, some practices, some state tournaments coming up. I wouldn't say we were worried. We prepared. Our security did a great job making sure parking was separated out in areas, and Bob Palmer is great to work with the election officials and making sure that we have a plan of egress and exit that I think is, Mark and I had these discussions ages ago, almost 10 years ago, and we had issues then that I don't think we have anymore, thanks to all of your feedback. So I think it was good.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
It's funny that you say that, Tom, because we actually had that discussion on election day. We're like, wow, I think it was one of the smoother election days that I can remember. Well, there have been in the past too, but those changes did make a difference. It really did. And that Spanish AP class, is that the one that I subbed with most of the time?
I think everybody said that you were the one that they need to thank for that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to staff reports and board discussions, and we'll have a report on the enrollment and class size analysis as of October 1st. The agenda says that Ms. Elizabeth Hewitt will report, and as you'll see, we have Mr. Paul Vicevich instead.
Liz has had a family emergency that she had to miss the meeting for, and is out of state right now, and so we're going to do this out of the book instead of a visual presentation. So if Paul refers to the page numbers, it's referring to the pages in your book here.
Yeah, and I'll follow through beginning on page 3. And basically, I assume I'm going to walk you through the enrollments. And again, these enrollments are a snapshot on October 1st. That's the first reporting window for West Hartford Public Schools to the State Department of Education. Our enrollment numbers will shift a little bit here in the fall and basically stable, but there are 3 formal reporting periods, although to the state that occur throughout the year. So on October 1st, West Hartford Public Schools, looking grades K through 12, not including our pre-K, had 8,787 students in their enrollment. That's down approximately 1% or 89 students from a year ago. When we take a look at that number and compare it to our projections to see where we landed, we'll see some general variances, and the biggest variances existed at the elementary level. We were actually predicting a modest decrease at the elementary level of in the neighborhood of about 50 kids. We actually saw an increase of 78 students. So overall, the difference from our projection to our actual number of students in class was 122, which was fairly significant at the elementary level and informed some changes, some use of our funds for additional sections, not only based on the increase, but coupled with the fact that we were looking to keep our class enrollments lower, our physical distancing for students amid COVID. Where those changes really impacted were mainly in grades K and 1, although a modest impact in grade 3 as well.
If I could jump in, Paul.
Please.
Just one of the things that's important to remember when we look at this is, okay, so if we say the district's getting smaller, but it's bigger than projections, the thing is there's different kinds of getting smaller, and for years we were getting smaller because the elementary was getting smaller, and so you extrapolate that out, and that means there's long-term district getting smaller. What's different this year is we had a big graduating class leave, yet the influx is at the early stages, so you could look at it as, well, the district's getting smaller. The long-term projection is if that continues in K1, especially where we saw the increase, now it could be a COVID year. We're going to need a couple years to see this, but that would actually, it's not, I mean, it's a matter of semantics whether you think it signals the district's getting smaller or the district getting bigger again. It just depends on how you look at it.
Very good. At the middle school level, the projections versus actual enrollment were a little bit closer. We decreased overall by 88 students. We were projecting to decrease by 95 students. These were differences that we planned for, and we were fairly close kind of in the aggregate, but sixth grade was slightly larger than expected. And that had, you'll see later on in this report that had an impact more so at Sedgwick than anywhere else. At the high school level, our high school enrollment declined by 79 students. We were anticipating that it would decrease by 62 students. So again, that was fairly close to projection and worked within the realm of how we had budgeted and allocated staffing. Moving on to look at how does that then translate out of grade level into class sizes. I'll talk first about the average class size at the elementary. Average class size this year currently, or as of October 1, I should say, is 18.7. And that does in fact represent the lowest class size that we've had by design for COVID. That we've ever had, with the exception of last year, kind of throws us off because we had that significant number of students. I think it was in the neighborhood of 700 students that were in a remote setting, at least at one point in the year. As I indicated, we did have more elementary. We had that 122 students additional. So at the beginning of the year, we were projecting to have 203 sections. We actually leveraged some of our ESSER funding, I believe, to come up to a total of 206 elementary classroom sections overall. And the majority of those, almost 80% of those, are below 20 students. Looking at the middle school, the average class size at the middle schools, at the three middle schools, are between 19.5 to 21, based on a little bit based on if you're looking at Bristow, King Philip, or Sedgwick. As you know, Bristow itself completed a planned reduction down to one team from kind of like a team and a half, or a super team as we like to call it. And whereas King Philip and Sedgwick are generally considered to be staffed at 3 full teams, they were staffed with a planned reduction to 2.5 teams in both 6th and 7th grade. Moving on to high school, the average class sizes at the high school are very close. They're 20.3 at Conard and 21.1 at Hall for the core classes, for your math, your English, social studies, science, and world language. If you average in the elective areas and discounting PE and music, which our music sections generally are going to have, we have larger enrollments as we have the ensemble groups kind of all meeting together in one section. averaging in the electives, the average class size is 19.7, 19.5 for Conard and Hall respectively. Following that, in the report you saw there are a number of tables that provided you examples at the secondary level with any of the classes that are kind of at either of the extremes for our class size guidelines. Any of the classes that had a low enrollment, anything under 12, anything that had a higher enrollment, anything over 27 students, with the notable kind of explanations. Generally, where you're seeing those in either case, usually in the lower enrollment classes, these are going to be some specialized classes that live within the regular education curriculum that are either new or something. If they were in low enrollment, a decision to not offer a section of that could mean that the program is terminated for a year or kind of arrested in its development. We've seen some of that. We are very cautious with that, so that those things don't create unanticipated impacts of being able to grow back enrollment. So that kind of is the highlight of the report, and I will do my best to answer any specific questions that you might have.
I have one thing to add off the presses today, is that very unique to October, because we submit this report to the state, the October 1st numbers, those are the official numbers for the district. All the demographic information comes from the October numbers. We still track through the years, so we can track housing markets, buildings, what classes are getting bigger. First time I've ever seen it, because typically October we see a slight decline or kind of even and not really much movement at all, but if anything it tends to be a slight decline. We're up 28 more from this in October. There's still people moving to town that started school in October. Tends to be elementary again, for that 28 person increase. So we continue to see these numbers increase the year goes on. Not sure if it'll continue throughout the year, but that's a very unique October data point.
Thank you. Liz, and then Mark.
Thanks, Paul, for that report. The one thing that stuck out to me on the report was the drop in enrollment at Charter Oak, the 8.9, the 41 students. And then I was noticing the big increases at Webb Hill and Whiting Lane. And I was wondering if you had any more data on that. If and it's specifically at Charter Oak, do we know where the students went, or and I was wondering, the schools that gained so many students, is that primarily at the kindergarten level?
The Charter Oak I can talk to. It's a neighborhood variance. It's a little larger than typical. Both Charter Oak and Smith have a propensity to go up or down, and if we knew sooner, the good thing about Charter Oak is that you can have people come in through magnet. 'Cause the good opportunity with this is that more people can magnet in, 'cause there's a wait list at Charter Oak. So that number is really just a neighborhood function. It's not, kids didn't choose to leave Charter Oak to go to another school in the district. That's not the case. So, you know, we're tracking that, but it's one of those where you don't want to make big assumptions, because it's 41 kids and at Charter Oak, it's also, you've got pre-K through. So once you extrapolate it out, you're looking at, 5 kids a grade, 6 kids a grade, and there's a couple areas that's a little different. And at Charter Oak and Smith, our class sizes are smaller than at the other schools in the district as part of the magnet school theme. So I'll be honest, we're monitoring it, but I don't see it as a long-term issue here. Charter Oak has been somewhere we've been getting people into. And the other simple fact is we can kind of control that because of the magnet school applications. And Paul, do you have any information on the school-by-school look?
I don't have necessarily, I have some specific information, not necessarily on those that you've asked about. I had noticed as well the variance at Charter Oak, so I appreciate that. The Webster Hill, I might just offer perhaps as a rebounding. I mean, if you look on the other page, on page 6, at the distribution of students across the different sections, you see that other than fourth grade, they're really just doing 3 sections per grade level, and they're all moderately sized. So if we went back a year to say, okay, where had they slipped, perhaps with some low breaks, and we'd actually have to go back 2 years in order to kind of check on that based on all the kids that pulled out into the remote setting last year. But they're essentially just kind of closer to what we would think of as typical with 3 classrooms per grade level. And I do notice that that's a big number, up 30 from the previous year. And a lot of these variances, in talking with Liz briefly, she said the variances do become greater school by school in terms of projected versus actual, and some of this can be just kind of moves into neighborhoods and moves out of neighborhoods and things of that nature.
One of the things Chip always said was, I'm very good at knowing how many kids by level there'll be. I just don't know where they're going to be. And that's, Morley being down, down 1.5%. Morley's still an exceptionally attractive neighborhood. So sometimes it's just a function of where did houses sell more. You and I know there's been some neighborhoods that have certainly had a lot of home sales this past year.
Mark?
Tom, you mentioned that the incoming kids were having a higher increase in October of kids. Are we finding, because, we kind of have a great school system, do we find that when these kids are coming in October that there's any learning deficits? And are we, maybe applying more resources to those kids coming into our district?
It's a fair question. We have placement at the high school level, middle school level. Sometimes we do some placement analysis. We'll do placement testing. At the high school, I can speak to it mostly from the high school level. That's where we were when, what a course is in another district isn't necessarily what it is here. And somebody can be in a course that they were getting a B in, and here maybe there's more rigor. Maybe it's just considered a different course and there's more of a struggle and we have to work through it with that child. In kindergarten and first grade and the elementary levels now, certainly there's a diagnosis going on, but that's more done by that classroom teacher as they get to know. And you also don't want to it's that kind of, people are like, it's easy to target schools with this. Well, you can't have a wait to fail model, and that's not what we do. It's not, well, you're going to fail. But you also can't make assumptions about somebody when their whole life's been turned upside down, whether good, bad, indifferent, and it's going to take them some time to get into the school. But I don't know about this year's group yet, but I'll know over the next few months, and whoever's sitting there, maybe I'll tell. But I'll send you an email.
Amanda?
Hi, thank you. I know this is a perennial issue that you have a lot of experience with, but I was just curious for this particular report on Table 1 on page 6. When thinking about space moving forward, when we look at Bugbee and Duffy and a little bit at Whiting Lane, as those kids who have an additional section in their younger years, are you good for space as they age?
I can go through that. We are, and when you look at some of those sections, don't forget we keep sections smaller in kindergarten than they are in 4th and 5th grade. So Duffy at 86 with 5 sections, that would be 4 sections in a typical year, in all honesty, as it goes to 2nd, 3rd grade. So there's that element. Duffy, we have space. Bugbee, we have space. I can tell you the building where you're at capacity is Wolcott. And that's the decision you make when we have 5th grade with 3 sections of 24. We talk to the teachers, talk to Scott Dunn. What kind of supports do you need? But we couldn't make another class because there are no classrooms. And part of that was taking off the portables. And if anybody thinks, well, that was a mistake taking off those portables, that wasn't a choice. They had been there. They had to come off at that point. So, who knows? In 4 years am I saying we need portables just the way we did 15 years ago at some buildings? I don't know. We can't make those suppositions. There's things you can do. Right now, if you move in to Wolcott at certain grades, we're going to put you at another school for the remainder of this year, just because we don't have the space right now. So with the number of schools we have that benefit. But right now, we're okay at Bugby, we're okay at Duffy. The place that's more of a warning light is Wolcott.
Lorna.
Thank you very much. High-level question. Recognizing that all efforts are put in place to keep the classes within the standard student-teacher ratio, may you share what conditions where a unique decision may have to be made, even if, let's say, the composition of a class is within normal realms, but something different may need to be done? Are there some examples where that has had to happen?
Sure. Say at the high end or the low end, or free reign?
Of your choice.
All right. I'll reference, since that information is really most bulleted out at the high school level, and I know at the bottom of those pages, on pages 12 and 13, they'll actually list some of the courses. I'll start at the low end. Typically the most interesting thing about high school courses is the number of sections that we're going to offer at any point in time are driven entirely on student enrollments. So students kind of control the number of sections, the popularity of a course based on the demand for the course. One of our new courses that we are excited about is the African American and Latino Studies, which is the curriculum that's mandated to be offered by the state, but the school districts are not mandated to offer the course. It's really a question of, will students come to it? We're piloting that curriculum 1 year in advance, and it's an area just like any course when it's brand new. There are very few courses that out of the gate become this dramatic draw. I think the only example that we saw of that ever was American Sign Language. But we have, one section that's running under 12 at one of our high schools, and we do anticipate that course in its second year is going to be a big draw. A similar example that I kind of mentioned, two of them. So the AP Spanish language, the second year course at Conard. That's a difficult course to attract enough students to over a long term. So we offer that course every other year, and we attempt to ensure the longevity of the course by basically being able to pool kids into it and make sure that they don't miss their opportunity if they're a senior. We had an issue with that with seminar and research. We've talked about those courses. Hall last year was unable to offer seminar. They just didn't have enough students to be able to do so. And so now the consequence of that this year is that they're not able to offer research because no one graduated in, and one is a prerequisite to the other. Very happy to announce, though, that with good marketing and outreach to students, that they're actually running 2 sections of seminar this year. On the high end of that, there are a handful of courses that may run over 27. An interesting one to note is the Latin courses that are offered at Conard, and this is really kind of Latin and the ancient Greek is kind of a cult following of a particular teacher that has built that course over years, and the only way to be able to offer it is often to have multiple sections of the class, multiple levels, a year 2 student, year 3 student, year 4 students in the same section at the same time. And the teacher is gifted at being able to differentiate for that. That's evidenced by the fact that the students continue to enroll and want to come back an additional year. So we see some courses that are higher enrollments, places we'd love to break that if we could, but we don't have that many ancient Greek teachers running around, and it becomes one of those decisions. Well, if I build that one bigger, I can offer that other course that's brand new. So that's a few examples.
And to go on the other end, well, the only other thing I'd add is you'll see some courses that are end of high school life course. I feel like we make a deal with a kid. A child signs up for a language, and only 9 kids then travel all the way through to AP Chinese. We're not going to cancel that course. We made a deal with you when you started in that course that you can follow through during your time. And I think it's important to honor that with kids. So especially that kind of thing. At the elementary level, and this is something we talked a few weeks ago, I think Liz had the question about how do we move away from, or in a few years when people look at ESSER money runs out, okay, there's pay for play again, there's this again. Well, the same thing holds for class sizes. People are getting used to very small class sizes. So in a couple years, when class sizes go up again, I know I will hear and you will hear, but our class needs us. Everybody wants smaller class sizes. There are times, because of the unique makeup of a class, where it just so happens the kids in that neighborhood, in that school, in that grade, at that point together, where, yeah, it does make sense to have a smaller class size than it might in another place, even in the same grade or something else. So there is an element of a case-by-case basis underneath that structure, and that's a conversation Paul, Rick, and I have with those principals in April and May, although they talk to me about it year-round. But yes, that's so it's something that we do think about in those terms in terms of keeping numbers down also.
Good, thank you both, and it's good to hear that there is some flexibility in case by case when needed, so good, thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, thank you for this. I was wondering if you could put our class sizes in context of surrounding districts and in the state. What is it? What do other districts look like? And if this is a pattern that other districts are seeing with increases in the kindergarten. Yeah.
Let me take the beginning of that because there's a historical context that's no longer on the chart. If you go back to the crash, 08, 09, 10, so if you look at the chart on page 8, if you had the chart that went back to then, to the number of sections at 27 or more in elementary school, it was over 20. Because we were in that significant budget crunch at that point, and that's one of the ways you can make money back is moving those positions through. In terms of right now, it's a hard comparison to make. I know there are districts that are struggling combining classes because they don't have teachers. And so that's an element that's real right now, both in the state and in the country at large. It affects our urban partners, as I said a few meetings ago, unfortunately more than it does everywhere else. Rick and I have said, and the superintendents, we're trying to get a group to agree. You're not going to say no to somebody that applies for an opening, but we're not going to be reaching out and trying to pull people away, because that's not being neighbors, and it's not good for the kids in those districts right now. So there are areas right now with significant class size issues. With that being said, it's hard to make a comparison right now because of COVID. I'll say this, our class size is small as they've ever been. Most districts have class sizes small. Other area towns, I can tell you Simsbury has the largest kindergarten group that they've had in the past 8 years. Farmington's is also up. I know those just because I've talked to the superintendents about that. Urban areas have not seen the same increase. Some other districts haven't seen the same increase in kindergarten. So there is definitely a pattern that kindergarten, some kids got redshirted for a year. What throws it off, where I think this may be more than an anomaly is here, is that we're seeing it, we already built in that we expected it, and we're seeing it in first grade too. So there's a move-in element that is a little bit different in West Hartford. That's unique to us. The first grade increase is unique to West Hartford.
Sorry, if I could follow up. One of the things that we've heard from parents is about how how our ESSER funds and other resources that we brought in to help students, and sometimes they'll cite class size, and I'm wondering, from my previous, from hearing prior presentations, it's made me think that class size isn't necessarily the driving factor for the allocation of those personnel, of those resources. That it is, there's a kind of finer tune awareness of student needs even within a class, and that that staff and resources are distributed according to need and as they're assessed. Is that accurate?
So it's I would say that both statements you made are accurate. We actually, you may recall our ESSER presentation. We did allocate, and I'll apologize, I can't necessarily quote you specific figures, but I know that we allocated additional funds for FTEs at all levels to have a greater number of sections. And at one point, I can recall specifically within elementary, we had counted, it was in the neighborhood of 12 to 17.
We would have had 198 sections. We budgeted in the budget for 203, made those 5 sections ESSER funding, but then we had so many moves into the summer, it actually went to 206. So it turns out there's 8, but then you're thinking of the FTEs that go into social emotional support. So those aren't necessarily for small class size.
Okay. Correct. And then I know that, in our English language arts and our mathematics, with our department supervisors returning to teaching, we held them out from returning to teaching in order that they could, recognizing that those are going to be 2 areas with some significant work to do to support children. We had that's an FTE increase at the high school / middle school. We did put in some extra positions at the middle school, little tweaks that we saw relative to making sure that we can get the specials to run on the half team model, especially as we saw numbers creeping up. So that was the FTE part of it, but then certainly a bulk of our funds under the ESSER model went to kind of the comprehensive supports for children, a number of special educators that were put into that fund. I know some clinicians that were put there. Obviously, in my realm, the mathematics coaches at the middle schools and high schools, the increase of the reading teacher for a dedicated full-time reading interventionist teacher at the elementaries, where we had the 2 schools that shared a half-time person, a dramatic increase in the number of tutors. Tom mentioned the social emotional supports, and that's what I can recall just off the top of my head. So it is absolutely both that we attended to student need, both in terms of that lower class size and the additional FTE funding within that, and then a number of other supports for students overall.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to routine matters, and we'll have the financial report. I think I'm calling up Dr. Morrow again. And this evening we will have our esteemed board member, Mark Zdanowitz, provide the financial report for the period ending September 30th. And I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
I didn't recognize that person you introduced, so thank you. So this will be my last report for the financial piece, so try to go out with a bang here. It's the first report of the year, so it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of experience, so all these are projections that what we'll have at the end of the year, and if you've seen this over the last year, they change, but these are the best projections. So with the general fund, there is, on salaries, there's going to be a estimated surplus of $50,000 at the end of the fiscal year, but for salaries, there's going to be a savings of $550,000, and that's a result of trouble hiring paraprofessionals and teacher assistants. So it's an issue, but you see it here financially being saved. No real issues with benefits. purchase services salaries are going to be offset for this, and it falls under purchase services, and it's going to be over budget by $500,000, but it's because we're going out to fill those slots with staffing agencies, so it's a little different. Other than that, supplies, materials, nothing at that time. So the grant funds, if you go to the grants, as you know, the above the line, that's the 2022, and those are the ones that are still that we have to expend, and we're hoping to receive a grant and receive our 2022 letters for the grant awards that we have on these. And then the carry forward below, you'll see the last three. We are giving, these are 3 grants that we're returning to the state, and we talked about this a little bit at the last report. These are 3 of the non-public funds, and it's you can see that the teacher training non-public, English language acquisition non-public, and then student support is all going to go back. So about $13,000. We have not seen, as of Friday, we have not seen the letter for the $9.7 million, but we expect that to be coming sometime in November here too. So the nutrition, well, the special programs fund, again, is expected that each of these programs will break even. And then, the bookstore is actually doing well too. That is a pretty good kickoff that we had. It was nice to go for the grand opening, and they're expected good things out of that. Let's see here. So for the nutritional services piece, we have funds operating at $86,000 through September 30. Meals are up. It's a great turnaround since last year. Meals has skyrocketed. We actually earned $86,000. We received $84,000 approximately in emergency operation costs, and the meals between 2020 and 21 was averaging about almost 4,300 a day. So that has been a big boost for us. Considering. Really, outside of that, it's a pretty straightforward report. Not a lot to report, again, as this is the first report of the year, and as you go through the year, these line items will get more detailed. So I can try to answer any questions without Liz here, between Deb, I, and Andy, and I would like to thank Andy for
That was an incredible report, Mark.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Probably the finest I've heard.
The finest you've heard. I
is.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Just that if they had awards for that, it'd be all right.
Are there any questions? Amanda.
Under the nutrition services report, do you have any indicators from any of the bigger picture conversations about if there's going to be supply chain issues that contribute to rising costs? Are they going to be concentrated in one area or another?
We are seeing that, like in most places. We've had to adjust and will continue to have to adjust menus dependent upon shipments. We had an errant Tyson truck that was 48 hours of tracking it down, which was a lot of fun. Many jokes were told, but it did eventually show up. And as Paul pointed out, it wasn't across the road. But we have been seeing some supply challenges for that. We're also seeing expenses with that, as I think most people are when they go to the grocery store and such. Certain things are costing us more, and so we're doing our best to mitigate that, and as well as keeping our labor costs down for that.
How much control do they have over the menu planning? If, like, say the chicken chuck doesn't show up, can they do beans instead?
Yes, we have contingencies in place, and it's never a situation where we're not sure what it's going to be type of thing. And so we go ahead and plan weeks, months in advance, and there's certainly contingencies upon what's here, what isn't here. We think there's going to be difficulty in 10 days getting this, so we're going to modify accordingly. And
If you
Tim
wanna-
does a wonderful job with that.
Yeah, if you want a tour as a private citizen of the Conard freezers, I'm happy to bring you over because they're pretty extensive.
It's a very substantial storage area.
Too. I would love that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't it, in light of that chicken truck not showing up on time, weren't they trying to allocate different resources? And now that isn't there an abundance that we were able to buy and fill some of those
There
freezers?
is, and again, we've done a very good job, and Tim does a very good job of making sure that there are contingencies in place, and when we have an ability to purchase, whether it be a protein, a resource, whatever, he'll go ahead and do that, and that way he has that to be able to shift to if need be.
The reason I mentioned Conard, just if anybody's watching and is interested, we follow a commissary model where there's cooking areas and then the meals go out. It's not necessarily the exact same. It's more efficient than that.
Andrew?
I just had two questions kind of for like personal interest. The Asia Society Foreign Language Grant, I'm just wondering why that came in like 2 iterations of different amounts, and then I was also just wondering, is that generally for like all foreign languages, or does that go straight to the Chinese program?
In the past, Andrew, and again, I don't know why that's booked as two separately on that, but usually what that grant has entailed in the past is it provides funding and opportunities for our Chinese language teachers to attend both regional and national conferences for additional training, because again, it's something that there may not be locally enough of a number of those teachers for that development, and so it provides some resources for that.
Any other questions? No other chicken jokes? All right, great. So, with that report, I will seek a motion that the board approve the financial report for the period ending September 30, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
Second, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Any further discussion? If not, I will try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying block, block, block. By saying aye. 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 Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? I laid an egg. All right. The motion the motion passes.
Getting worse.
Moving on to item B, approval of the minutes. I am seeking a motion to approve the minutes from the October 19, 2021 regular Board of Education meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. There was a moment of tension there. Any discussion on the minutes? If not, I will try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Information and reports. Moving to board members' communications and reports. Are there any reports from other boards and organizations? No? Any other information and discussions? Great. Moving to non-staff communications and reports from the student board representatives. I'll turn it over to Avery.
Well, Mr. Moore already foreshadowed this a bit. We've had a really great season so far. It's still going for sports at Hall. Football is undefeated, 7-0. And the most exciting news is in the CIAC Class LL State Championships, girls placed number 2 overall with many placements in the top 10, including, I believe, number 5. And boys placed number 1, which was a first in Hall history. In the same vein as athletics, I thought this was interesting. Our esports team, the Hall Rocket Warriors, defeated Conard 3-0, and is number 1 in the state as well. So we're on top with cross country and esports. Auditions for Almost Maine have begun after a successful run of the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. Almost Maine is a story of love and loss in a remote in a remote almost town, and it'll be running this December. Last Thursday, Warriors donated 31 pints to the blood drive that was organized by the National Honor Society with the American Red Cross, which, for context, can save up to 93 lives. And this Sunday, Hall's Concert Jazz Band and Jazz 2 are putting on a concert to benefit the Foundation for Contemporary Arts, which is an organization that encourages innovative works for artists of all mediums and all backgrounds.
Thank you. And Andrew?
Fall sports are coming to an end over the next 2 weeks, but a number of teams have had especially successful seasons. Boys soccer, they're moving on to the state tournament next week. Volleyball, which I think last time I updated everyone on volleyball, I think girls volleyball was 12-1, and now they're 16-1, so they're definitely continuing to have success. And then in the CIAC Class L Boys Cross Country Championship, Gavin and Callum Sherry came in first and second respectively, so very successful there. As Mr. Moore noted, also the fact that 3 students at Conard got perfect AP scores is definitely something. As a student who's taken some of these classes and the language classes, I find it extremely impressive, and I know how hard they are to do, and then obviously to get a perfect score on. And then we also have a number of other special programs that have happened over the past few weeks. Last week there was a distracted driving presentation, and that was something in the gym classes, that was something I got to witness, and that was really informative and very powerful, so I'm glad that we had that. The Red Sea hosted a very successful food drive with at least 7 boxes full of non-perishable food, and before the last meeting, band and orchestra had a concert, but choir has since then also had their first in-person concert since the pandemic started.
Great, thank you. Thanks for those updates. Future business, announcement of future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 16th in this room. This will be a very brief meeting that begins at 6 and will be over by 6:55 p.m. It has been so ordered. The next meeting after that, Tuesday, December 7th in this room at 7 p.m., followed by Tuesday, December 21st at 7 p.m. Are there any requests for future agenda items? Mark, any requests?
I just want to promote the Hall Conard football game, November 20th, right? I was putting in, November 20th, the Hall football game, 10:30 in the morning, 11 and 1:30. You guys know? 1:30.
I don't know, but I'll be there.
Yeah, 1:30 in the afternoon. So come out, and everybody, let the whole community come out for that one.
Good community event. Thank you. Any comments from visitors? We do not have an executive session this evening, and so I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Lorna. Any second motion?
Second, Amanda Aronson.
All right. Without objection, meeting is adjourned. 8:37 p.m.